Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. We're going to be going across to Ukraine to my colleague Vishnu Shom, who's reporting from the war zone in just a little while. His latest ground reports in just a few minutes from now. But first, the rising COVID graph in India, or at least in parts of the country. There has been a sharp spike in overall cases, but it appears that has a lot to do with the fact that Kerala wasn't reporting its COVID numbers for the last 5 days and has suddenly decided to report them today. But we are seeing a hike in Delhi, in Haryana and in Uttar Pradesh, and many of these cases are coming from schools. Let's in fact take a look at what the latest COVID data in the country shows us. We're seeing it was 2,184 cases, a jump of nearly 90% in 24 hours, but that's because 914 cases were reported today from Kerala alone. Same with the deaths, 214 in the last 24 hours. Kerala's backlog of deaths, more than 200 of those have added to those numbers. Now you can see vaccinations are going up. Overall, the country's cases are not looking so bad considering where we were a year ago. But the fact is that there is an uptick in cases now in a big way. In Delhi in particular, in Haryana, in Gurgaon, that's the suburb of Delhi, as well as in Uttar Pradesh. And many of these cases, as I said right at the beginning, are being reported from schools that have reopened only weeks earlier. The question is, how can we find a way to safely live our normal lives in this pandemic? Remember, at this point, many of these places which are reporting high cases now don't even have mask mandates indoors. There are no fines also anymore for not wearing a mask, even in indoor crowded spaces. Let's take a look at the very latest.
At least 2 schools shut last week because of rising COVID cases reopened today in Ghaziabad, next door to Delhi. It is one of the places where masks have been made mandatory by the government. Local officials say cases are rising, mostly amongst children.
शासन के और माननीय मुख्यमंत्री के निर्देश पर एक तो सर्वेलेंस की गतिविधि को बढ़ाया गया है। विगत कुछ दिनों में कुछ स्कूल्स में जो कोविड केसेस आई है सामने है, ओवरऑल एनसीआर में कुछ हद तक पॉजिटिविटी दर जरूर वृद्धि हुई है, परंतु समाज में कोई भी एज सच कोई हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन में इंक्रीज या कोई वृद्धि देखने को नहीं मिली है।
केसेस जरूर बढ़ रहे हैं, जैसे मौसम बदल रहा है तो केसेस ज़्यादा आ रहे हैं, पर दिल्ली की टोटल पॉपुलेशन जो है वो वैक्सीनेटेड हो चुकी है। साथ ही बहुत बड़ी संख्या में लोग इन्फेक्टेड भी हो चुके हैं। तो अब जो केसेस आ रहे हैं पॉजिटिव जरूर आ रहे हैं, बट दे आर नॉट सीरियस। हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन नहीं बढ़ रहा है उसकी वजह से।
In UP's Noida, also bordering Delhi, there are 65 new COVID cases. Almost 19 are students below the age of 18. 9-year-old Aradhak of Noida is back to online classes again. His school has been shut for a week after over 10 students tested positive for COVID. Offline classes will resume from Wednesday. The UP government is stepping up action with a big focus on schools. Face masks in public places back to being mandatory in Noida, Ghaziabad, Hapur, Meerut, Bulandshahr, Bagpat, as well as distant Lucknow. Noida has ordered schools to set up COVID help desks to check students for symptoms and implement COVID protocols. The Noida administration's advice to parents is this: don't send children with COVID-like symptoms to school. Over 90 students in 22 schools of Gautam Budh Nagar and Ghaziabad tested positive for COVID since campuses reopened for the new academic session this month. Parents are worried, but especially those whose children are taking the boards from next week.
स्कूल क्लोज करना एक कोई मतलब परमानेंट ऑप्शन नहीं है। इफ 40 स्टूडेंट्स आर देयर इन वन स्कूल देन दे शुड कॉल 20 स्टूडेंट ऑन मंडे, देन 20 स्टूडेंट ऑन ट्यूसडे। ऑनलाइन क्लासेस ठीक है, ठीक थी, बट स्टिल ऑफलाइन इज बेटर देन ऑनलाइन।
क्योंकि बोर्ड्स होने हैं तो बच्चों को एग्जाम भी देना जरूरी है। तो हमारी तो सरकार से ये मांग है कि सेल्फ सेंटर करा दिए जाएं, कोई बहुत परेशानी नहीं है, बच्चों को इधर से उधर मूवमेंट नहीं करना पड़ेगा।
Several states in India had removed all COVID restrictions after cases came down. But with the numbers surging again, especially among children in some areas, the authorities are changing their action plans. In Noida, with camera person Sushil Rathi, this is Sukirti Dwivedi for NDTV.
So how can we find a safe way to live with COVID? Because clearly it is here to stay. Joining us this evening on NDTV, Dr. Shahid Jameel, Senior Virologist and Fellow at the Green Templeton College at Oxford University. Joining us, Dr. Hemant Thakkar, member of Maharashtra's COVID Task Force is with us, Professor Riju John. who's a consultant with the WHO and with the Rajgiri College of Social Sciences in Kochi, is joining us. Dr. Sunila Garg, member of the Lancet Commission and COVID India Task Force, and Professor Mahindra Agarwal from the IIT Kanpur. They've been doing a lot of studies on various waves and whether we're going to get them or not. But let me first begin with you, Dr. Shahid Jamil. We don't want to create panic, but do we have a cause to worry at the moment with this uptick right now confined to Delhi, Haryana and UP, but could it be the start of another wave?
Well, Nidhi, thank you for having me on the show. I think it is something to be expected. It's not unexpected. As schools open up, remember, children are the least vaccinated group in the country right now. So it is expected that cases would go up, but also remember that children also have the least serious disease. So I think one thing that we have learned going forward is that, yes, while cases cause a bit of worry, but it's really serious cases, it's hospitalization rates that we should really be worrying about. Because time again, we have seen that people who are vaccinated do get infected. People who have had a prior infection also get reinfected. So this virus is different from the viruses that we have been used to dealing with. So I'm not surprised this is happening. The test positivity rates are going up quite a bit in Kerala, also in Delhi. Pretty much all of Delhi is a test positivity in the range of about 2.5% to 5%, except for South Delhi, which is up to about 6.5%. Gurgaon is around 11%. Noida is also around 6.5%.
So you're saying what the Delhi government is also telling us at the moment, which is that hospitalizations are low, yes, and therefore there isn't any need to panic. I guess the key also would be, and let me get Dr. Sunila Garg in on this. Do we know what variant it is at the moment? Have we done enough genome sequencing? Is this a new variant? Is this the Omicron we saw a couple of months ago?
This is only what we call it as Omicron. So basically, it's not a new variant. We only saw 2 cases of XC, of which one was little doubtful, and that was, asked for the repetition. But what I will say is the ripples cannot be called as wave. That is one thing we have to remember. As of now, we know that, and this was expected, as has been pointed out, that when suddenly we will be giving up, COVID appropriate behavior, as we should not forget that when vaccines were not available, mask was very important social vaccine. So this is where, when we look at approximately, our 9 states, of which, when we talk of Delhi, Kerala, Haryana, UP, Maharashtra and Mizoram, we see large number of cases because one is that we do not have smart surveillance and smart testing strategy as well, because we should not give up with this strategy, which is important, along with COVID appropriate behavior. And secondly, that is another important thing, is that the variant, whichever variant is going to come, we are going to be affected in a milder way. But then we also have to remember that we do have elderly population. We have also people who are immunocompromised, or the pregnant women, in which the infection can be serious as well. So that is where we need to, not to give up the COVID appropriate behavior, and we need to have our surveillance strategy, which is very smart, and also the school strategy. We cannot every time shut down the schools and open the schools, because ours is amongst only the 5 countries in the world which close the schools during the pandemic. So it is very important to kind of give this message loud and clear across, that parents should not panic, the teachers should not panic, because after all the pressure falls on the administration. The vaccination will be given to children as and when their turn comes. But we should not forget that, even after getting the vaccination, they are not going to be protected from acquiring the infection.
Which is why masks become important, which is why masks become so important. And I'm coming back to the mask point. But Professor John, what is going on in Kerala? What are you seeing there in terms of the rise in number of cases?
Well, Nidhi, thank you for having me here. As you rightly mentioned at the beginning, Kerala had actually stopped reporting their daily, case counts on a daily basis, and they report for the last 3-4 days backlogs they reported yesterday. But when they stopped actually reporting, Kerala was contributing about 30% of the active cases in the country. But now when I look at with the backlogs included, the active cases contribute only about 20%. I mean, Kerala's active cases contribute only about 20% in the country. Well, in Kerala at the moment, I don't see the cases beginning to rise. It's still on a falling trajectory. It's not yet started rising. At the moment, I was looking at the district-wise data, and I see it's mostly concentrated in the NCR region, especially in a couple of districts, as you mentioned in the beginning, including Delhi, Gurugram, Faridabad, Meerut, and Ghaziabad. These are the districts where it is starting to rise. In Kerala, I don't see any rise. So, yeah, that's my take on Kerala. At the moment, there is nothing to worry in Kerala as such. The state is still reporting the backlog of deaths that's still going on for the last 3 months now, more than 3 months now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Thakur, just to ask you whether you believe that we need to reintroduce mask mandates. I was asking this the other day as well. There seemed to be opinion divided on whether, fines should be reintroduced or not. But frankly, you see people taking off masks indoors in crowded spaces, and unless there's a fine or some consequences, I don't think they're putting them back on.
I think I agree with you. Remember, a mask is not only going to protect you against COVID, but is going to protect you against so many other respiratory and pollutional diseases. And except for the fact that you might remove your mask when there is a very, very large distanced room or in your private office or home, I still think we must have a mandate that in crowded areas, in malls, at railway stations, in trains, you must have the mask. Now, regarding fining people, I think in India, unless you show them the carrot and stick approach, nothing works. People have dropped everything. The mask, the COVID appropriate behavior, they are jostling in their queues. And when you tell patients who come to see us at clinics in the hospital, or when you see relatives who have come to visit patients in the hospital, that you're in a susceptible area, please wear your mask, they turn around and say, well, we've not been asked to wear masks. So I think one will have to do a little bit of arm twisting for the sake of keeping the numbers low and manageable. COVID is not like Cinderella, that on the 1st of April, all the clothes changed and she became a princess. You've got to understand you have to live with COVID. You have to understand that like influenza, you're going to have small ripples, as one of my colleagues said. But that ripple could very well become a wave in the form of numbers. May not be wave in the form of disease, but you can have numbers. And that can be discomforting to pregnant mothers, to immunocompromised people, to mothers sending their kids to school.
Absolutely.
You can close schools. So you have to be careful, wear the mask, practice social distancing, and let common sense rule. It's a matter of 3-4 months. You've been allowed 50% of the time no masking, but the remaining you must induce yourself to think appropriately.
Absolutely. And I think what people don't realize is that you're not just protecting yourself, but you're protecting someone else who's probably more vulnerable than you and may not make it because you decided to be careless. Professor Agarwal, what are your projections? Are we going to see, do you see another wave? I'm asking you as if you have a crystal ball, but if you do, are you seeing one?
No, I don't see any other way. Based on the data that I have seen so far, it is as mentioned by panelists, it just seems like a ripple.
Okay, that's quite a relief to know. And how can we say that with certainty, given what we've seen in the past?
Well, unless there is a new mutant which has been informed that there doesn't seem to be one. Against the existing variants, we already have very significant amount of immunity in our country. So I do not see how that can all go away in a significant way and we can see a major wave. It's very, very unlikely.
Dr. Shahid Jamil, do we know, what the impact is of people who have repeated infections? Because now we're at this stage where we're hearing not of just of people having 2 COVID infections, but now possibly even 3 with shorter gaps. Is there any sort of scientific data, evidence, report, etc., that tells us what that's doing to our bodies at the moment?
Well, it's too early for that. They're certainly getting much better immunity with every infection, but what is the impact on their general health status is too hard to tell. There's not enough time. I think it's very important to have the capacity to follow up what we call long COVID, which in any case happens in about 1 in 5 people who get infected, whether the infection is mild or severe. So that healthcare capacity needs to be built up for times to come. But it's very hard at this point to say that. Let me also say something about school. I think there is a lot of emphasis on masking, but not enough emphasis on proper ventilation. It's the hot season in India now, so it's a little hard to keep windows open all the time. But as far as possible, keep windows open and run your fans at high speed. Better ventilation, better air circulation is going to work in our favor, at least in a school setting.
Absolutely.
The second thing I would like to say about schools is that there are clear studies now available that suggest that while infections do happen in schools, a lot of infection also happens at home. And the best predictor of reduced infections is whether both parents are vaccinated or not. So it's not just, parents would worry about schools, but I think parents should also worry about making sure that they are themselves vaccinated fully to protect their child.
And now we have the option of boosters as well. They're called precautionary doses in India. So I think those who can should do it. Dr. Sunila Garg, just a comment on vaccinations for children. How urgent is it for us to now really get moving on that for younger children?
You see, particularly even when we are talking of, age 12 to 14 years of age, we see substantially less number of, children who are getting vaccinated, probably because of the fact that we are getting lesser number of infections. But last few days data will definitely, motivate the parents to overcome this hesitancy for the children, because that's one of the things. But you see, as and when the vaccine is available, we should do that. But till the time, you see, COVID appropriate behavior is going to be very good. And as soon as the vaccine is there for the children, we should be vaccinating them. And vaccines are available now, and that is where it will be. And gradually we have to move down in a phased manner. But you see, that does not bother me, because when we look towards the youngest children, when we are talking of 5 years and above, already the ACE inhibitors are less, the infections are milder in children. But most important part is that as and when it is available, it should be given. But we don't have to worry about that fact that, the vaccine is not there and then we have to be, stopping the children from going to school. This is what also we have done. But important part is, as has been pointed out, the vaccination part has been already discussed, the masking and ventilation. These two things are critical.
Right. So, Dr. Thakur, just a quick last word. What would you say are the SOPs that schools should follow if a child tests positive, let's say in a particular class? What should they do?
So send the child home and find out the vaccination status of the people in the class. Maybe test the kids in the class again, and anyone found to be positive also could be sent home for a period of only 5 days. But you cannot afford to close the school. Maybe, as somebody said, you can do it in batches where you have 20 people on Monday, Wednesday, and you have 20 on Tuesday, Thursday. But even that may not be required, especially if you see that besides the kids, the other staff in the school is also properly distanced and properly masked. Quite often you see the kids are masked, but the other paraphernalia, the class 3-4 workers are not masked. So I think school has to go on. Education has to go on. It is we who have to change and adapt. Remember, one warning which I would like to cite is that 3 days ago I wrote an article on long COVID. With every infection, even asymptomatic, you get a sapping of your immune system, and you could be left behind with muscle pain, fatigue, headache, low-grade fever, depression, and all sorts of symptoms which we are still unraveling 2 years after COVID. So don't take COVID lightly. So what if you're vaccinated? You could get an asymptomatic infection, but you could be one of the 5 that lands up with long COVID symptoms. Be careful.
All right, I think that's a good note to end on, to be careful. That's all that one can really ask people to do. Thank you very much to all of you for weighing in on that important story today. Lots of people writing to us on Koo and other social media platforms on Koo. You have Mr. Perfect, who says that we should all realize the virus is still active and it will be with us for a long time. We cannot reach a conclusion that COVID has gone just by looking at active cases. You should follow all precautions. And Tushar has said that countries like Australia and New Zealand are fighting the pandemic. Why is our government not learning from them? Well, I think India is doing pretty well at the moment. Hopefully, it stays that way. Moving on, the conflict in Ukraine appears to be entering a new and especially dangerous phase. Russia is expected to launch another offensive into eastern Ukraine in the coming days. Ukrainian authorities say that Mykolaiv, near the key strategic military port of Odessa, is resisting Russian attacks. Mykolaiv is one of Ukraine's most important junctions. It's a major commercial river and seaport and a major highway and rail junction. Vishnu Shom was there today and sent us this report.
Well, we are coming to you at this stage from Mykolaiv. Mykolaiv lies right to the south of Ukraine. This was a building which was attacked at the end of March. 36 people were killed over here. This was a cruise missile strike which took place by the Russians who were operating a warship out in the Black Sea. This is a major Black Sea port. There's very heavy shipbuilding activity over here. Let's just walk and go up to this building. We are with a Ukrainian army officer who's escorting us to this particular place. There's a great deal of damage, as you can see. We're just going to follow him as he takes us up over here so that we can get a better idea of the extent of the damage. And it's very sad because he was telling me about how he's lost his friends over here. He in fact works in this particular building, but right now he was away from the building at the end of March when the attack took place. But this actually shows you some of the damage. This entire block of the building collapsed in this particular area. You can see carpets over here, rubble over here, parts of chairs. This was the administrative block, or administrative building of the entire Mykolaiv area. And a single missile fired from the Black Sea brought this entire place down. It should also be mentioned that the warship which actually sank a few days back, the Moskva, it was actually built in Mykolaiv, which is a major shipbuilding center during the Soviet times, and the missile which was launched to attack it, Ukrainian Neptune missiles, were launched somewhere in this area. So the Moskva was built over here in Mykolaiv. It was destroyed many decades after by Ukrainian forces firing a missile somewhere in this area. But prior to that, this is an area where there have been so many attacks. In fact, we heard lots of artillery shelling a little while back, in fact when we were broadcasting live. And we are told that this happens all the time over here. Shall we carry on and see a little bit more?
This is more the first floor.
Wow, yeah.
Security post is over here.
Yeah.
Policemen is work in this place.
Right.
And they died in this place.
Yeah. And you were telling me that you had friends over here who've died, right?
Yeah.
How many
They
friends?
works in this place.
Right.
I have 2 friends in this office, but
Yeah.
And
you are from Mykolaiv yourself?
Yes.
This is your hometown?
Yes, this Mykolaiv is my native town.
And there's no electricity, no water, nothing here right now?
Only water we don't have now, but we have hospitals, electricity,
right,
and others.
Right. And why is Mykolaiv so important in this war, the location?
Because after Mykolaiv, Russians want to occupy Odessa and others south of Ukraine. They want to occupy all seas of Ukraine, Black Sea and seas of Azov.
Yeah.
And maybe next Moldova, because in Moldova Russians have Transnistria.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they every time speak about this.
Right.
And his plans about occupated this area.
And the bombing of Mykolaiv happens every single day, right?
Yes, in the morning, in the night, and sometime in the day.
Have most people left Mykolaiv?
Yes, first women and children.
Yeah. And of course men are over here and they need to fight. So that's the law, right?
Yes, men is prepared to fight. This is not first time because they tried early to occupy Mykolaiv, but they died here.
One final question. Mykolaiv is your hometown. You must be feeling very sad.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. I appreciate that. And giving us, showing us be careful, Ashok, behind you, the extent of the damage over here, what war actually does. 36 people were killed in this building. The war here in Ukraine doesn't show any signs of ending. With Uma Shankar Singh and Ashok Mahale, Vishnu Shom for NDTV.